Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth. I am your host, Tony Sweet, and we have in studio a very special guest co-host. We have intuitive Tricia Carr. 10 years ago this month, 39 people in Rancho Santa Fe, California, ritually terminated their lives. To outsiders, it was a mass suicide. To insiders, it was a graduation. You might remember it. It's called Heaven's Gate. Today we're going to talk with researcher and teacher of religion, Benjamin Zeller, on how religion has become a cult, and sometimes cult becomes religion. In the book Heaven's Gate, America's UFO Religion, Zeller traces the roots of the movement, examines the beliefs and practices, and tells the captivating story of the people of Heaven's Gate. It's going to be a very interesting interview. We hope you guys enjoy it. Ben Zeller serves as assistant professor of religion at Lake Forest College, suburb of Chicago. I have a feeling this is going to be a great show. So we want to welcome to Truth Be Told, where we believe an experience becomes truth, author, researcher, teacher, Benjamin Zeller. Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be a good show. I know we're talking about suicide, so I shouldn't be that excited. But this type of stuff, I'm so interested in. So, well, thank you, Ben. So this is going to be good. So you're a professor and teacher of religion. I'm kind of curious. And by the way, we have the amazing, intuitive Tricia Carr in studio with us. But I'm curious how you were interested in Heaven's Gate to start with, because it's a cult, and it's dealing with UFOs, and that's right up our alley here at Truth Be Told. So, can you get us started on the journey of where you got started with Heaven's Gate?
Sure, happy to. So the suicides occurred in 1997, as your viewers probably, listeners probably recall. I was actually a college student at the time in 1997, and I was a religion major, and I was studying what one might call the world's religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, that sort of stuff. And I was taking a upper level class on messianism and millennialism in the world's religions. So messianism, belief in messiahs or savior figures, and millennialism is belief in the end of the world. So I was taking a course in this, and we were looking at ancient millennialism and medieval millennialism, sort of these messiahs that were present in the ancient world in different cultures and civilizations. And that was the same spring in 1997 when the Heaven's Gate suicides occurred. So here I was studying these ancient texts and looking at people, 1,000 years ago who were talking about the end of the world in the year 999, basically. And then unfolding before my eyes was this mass suicide, and was a real life, present day group which claimed that their leader was a reincarnated Christ figure and that the end of the world had come. So I started researching it. I was an undergraduate at the time. I give great honor to the teacher I had. He was an older sort of Jesuit fellow who said, I asked him if I could study this. He said, well, I know nothing about it, but go ahead and study it. And to me, that's the heart of a teacher. He said, just go at it and try to understand it. So I've been on that journey ever since, of trying to understand why is it that 40 odd people were willing to end their lives. Well, how could they believe so strongly in something that they were willing to take that ultimate step? So it's a puzzle I've been trying to unravel ever since. That's how I got into it.
Well, like we were talking before the show, I've talked to somebody about Jonestown. I mean, you go back to the Manson tribe. This is not, the first time, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time, because I've seen multiple cults throughout history. And when you do start studying this, we think it's craziness. Why do you think people do fall for cults or these figureheads that say that they're the Messiah or somebody that's going to be the next ruler of the world, and these people fall for it? Because we always think it's these young kids. Oh, it must be kids that are falling for it. But no, some of these are adults, very established people in their careers and families. And what do you think that these people are falling for? How are they falling for it?
Yeah, you can give two answers. One is sort of the big social historical reasons about major trends and changes in society. The other is the individual psychological ones, reasons why an individual would join a group. To answer sort of the big historical sociological way, we tend to see these groups often emerging during times of transition in societies.
Mm-hmm.
So the way in which American society was transforming in the mid 20th century, having to do with everything from immigration to the sort of opening of society, late 60s, early 70s, led to a sudden interest in broadening one's spiritual horizons, such that the idea of tuning in and dropping out, so to speak, suddenly appealed to people in a way in which it hadn't 20, 30 years ago, perhaps. That's a social reason for it. But also individually, if you talk to the members of such groups or study them, their writings or their recordings in the case of Heaven's Gate, because they're no longer here, what emerges are the stories of people who were searching, who were questing for meaning in their life. And the sort of the answers that satisfy everyone else just didn't satisfy them. They didn't feel like they fit in existing religions, existing families, existing structures. They wanted something more than the ordinary lives that the rest of us tend to live. And they were looking, and in many cases, they joined lots of different groups before they found one which fit. And in fact, there were hundreds of people who joined Heaven's Gate and left because it wasn't what they were looking for, and they found some other group. Many of them went back to mainstream religions and society, perhaps. We don't entirely know. But there's always an individual trajectory for these people. And the answer of why did they join often varies. But the basic answer is they were looking for something, and they found it in this group.
So can you tell us about Marshall Applewhite?
Sure. Marshall Herf Applewhite, he was called Herf by his friends within Heaven's Gates. He went by the name Doe at the end of the group's existence, or Bo earlier on. He was the son of a very popular Texas Presbyterian preacher. There you go. There's a picture of him towards the end of his life. When he was young, he was interested in becoming a preacher like his father. He actually went to seminary. So he took a year of seminary training at a Presbyterian seminary in Virginia, where he learned sort of the basics of Christianity beyond what he'd already grew up with as a kid. He left, and there's different reasons for leaving. One is he felt the call to music. He always wanted to be a musician, and he wanted to work in music. The other reason that he probably didn't feel called to serve in sort of 1950s Texas religion was that he was bisexual, and he was closeted at the time. So he probably didn't feel particularly welcomed in that way. But the reason which he always emphasized, and which his friends at the time remember him saying, was it was music. He joined the Army for a while, and then after he worked for a couple of years in the Army, got a master's in music, and became involved in musical theater. He taught musical theater at some local colleges and worked at some local theaters. And eventually he met Bonnie Lou Nettles, who co-founded Heaven's Gate with him. Do you want me to tell you about Nettles?
Yes, please.
Were they a couple?
Sure. So Nettles, fascinating figure. So Applewhite brings this Christian trajectory into the group. Nettles was a theosophist and a spiritualist.
Yes.
So theosophy, if you know anything about that, is a sort of late 19th
that's the
century
kind of stuff
religion.
I'm into.
Yeah. So it brings, all these ideas from Asia and reincarnation and karma, about personal sort of spiritual development, and really importantly about communication with the ascended masters and with beings on other planets and on other planes of existence or far away on Earth, with whom you communicate and who give you spiritual guidance. She believed that she was able to communicate with these beings. She actually ran she ran a astrology group. She wrote an astrology column for a local newspaper. And she, in her personal channeling, communicated with a 19th century Catholic monk named Brother Francis before she met Applewhite. After they met, they primarily communicated with next level beings, as they called them, so extraterrestrials. Okay. But before that, she primarily communicated with deceased human beings. So they meet, and she does his chart, and they decide that the stars have foretold that they have a spiritual connection and that they are destined for great things together. And the rest, as you say, is history.
I'm curious. Well, yeah, for those who are listening, can you tell us a rundown of what Heaven's Gate, what they believed in, what their belief structure was? I mean, obviously the evangelical Christianity and the theosophy must have had some influence.
Yeah, absolutely. So their basic idea was that each individual is personally evolving towards a higher level of consciousness. You can see the theosophical connection there. Uh-huh. And this goes through multiple incarnations. They believed in reincarnation. But they believe that the ultimate spiritual development you can aim for is actually off our planet, so that the goal is to transcend humanity and to evolve into a next level being. Next level is their term for sort of this heavenly state in outer space that they aim for. So what they did is they brought from theosophy and from sort of the New Age movement, which was still informing at the time, this idea of sort of personal development and exploration and evolution. And they combined it with this very Christian sense that the end of the world was coming and the time had come to get off planet, that each of their personal evolutions had to come to an end point. They had to graduate from the class of humanity. And basically what they taught was a variant of what some Christians would call the rapture. So the rapture is this idea that Jesus will sort of come down mid-atmosphere and hover, and the elect, the saved, will sort of rise up and join him, and then they're going to go off to heaven. So the variant on that is that Jesus is going to be on a spaceship, and that the spaceship is going to hover mid-atmosphere, and those who are destined to join will be, come up on a tractor beam or something like that, and then they'll go up into outer space. So it has a bit of the Christian rapture, end of world approach, but it also has the idea that each individual has to spiritually evolve and transform themselves. And the goal is to become an extraterrestrial being. Basically, these perfected alien beings who live eternally and never get sick and they don't have to eat. They're basically next level sort of space alien angel beings.
Where do I sign up? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, that's it. That's the attraction, right?
Yeah.
If you're not into life on Earth, this is what they offered.
What was there a particular planet that the ETs that they were aspiring to become? Was it like Andromeda, the Pleiades, Lyra?
They explored different possible answers early on in the 70s. They did talk about sort of these different options, but they never said which planet the next level aliens were coming from. They did note that there were also sort of evil aliens as well, the Luciferians, they called them.
Okay.
And they particularly identified the Luciferians. They said they might be on Mars, or they might be sort of elsewhere close in the solar system. So the implication was that wherever the next level beings were, they were outside of our solar system. But they didn't say which star or which planet.
And did they say whether they were ascending to become another incarnated being, or was it a discarnate kind of consciousness?
Incarnate. That was very important that they be incarnate beings.
Okay.
I can show you the picture. It was famous on their website. You might already have it queued up, but it's that picture of that sort of looks like a gray. If you know that style.
Uh-huh.
I'll find a picture for you in my book, but you might already have it.
I'll look for it.
But they didn't identify. They didn't say they were going to become grays, but that was.
Well, no, they did. They said they were going to basically become grays.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I believe. Well, I can't find it in the book. It's funny. The one question you asked, I can't find on my own book. How's that for embarrassing?
Tony's looking it up.
But think of sort of your next level creature from the gray style alien. But it was very much the positive gray. So think Close Encounters of the Third Kind style. The very childlike, innocent, nice looking gray. We're not talking. There you go. You found it before I did. So look at that. So that's what they're looking for. Sort of that peaceful, kind, beneficent. But again, look at the size of the head too. Mm-hmm. So intelligent. They communicate telepathically. Really perfected beings, but incarnated. That was really important. They didn't want to live in a discarnate state. That was not appealing to them.
And the general, I would say, consensus in communities of metaphysical communities that explore, other dimensional, other terrestrial beings, is that grays are both benevolent and malevolent. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of a mix. So but they had this. They wanted to. Was that their ideal as well? I mean, was that their belief that there was both?
Here's where it gets
good and bad.
So, like any religion, different members believe different things.
Okay.
So Applewhite only emphasized the benevolence of the next level.
Okay.
And these beings is benevolent. He did occasionally mention these Luciferians, these sort of fallen beings. Some of the members wrote about the Luciferians as being reptilian.
Right. Yes.
There was no clear consensus about what the Luciferians looked like, or if there might be Luciferians who looked more like the Greys. In any group, you're going to find 40 different opinions. I mean, there's basically, including Nettles, there were 40 of them basically by the end. So some members believed that there were lots of different sorts of extraterrestrial beings of different sizes and shapes and qualities. Others only talked about the next level beings they wanted to become, whether it was because of individual or variant readings within the group. I can't tell you.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, Tony. I hope you don't
No,
mind.
this is, I'm fine. They're great questions, so I'm like, go for it.
I just.
People don't usually ask me these level of details. They just want to know about the suicide and the castration and stuff.
Oh,
but,
I don't care about that.
That's
that's actually sort of irrelevant.
right.
I think
right.
it's boring. That
No,
part's
this
boring.
is more interesting. I'm like, go for it. I'm like, this is good stuff.
Well, I'm curious. I'm also curious about just basically the difference between when does a religion become a cult, and would you classify Heaven's Gate more as a religion, or was there a point that you would classify them as a cult? Those are kind of the other things I'm interested in.
Yeah, so I don't use the term cult because
Yeah.
to me it's just sort of a pejorative way of referring to someone else's religion you don't like.
Right. I think
I don't know
so
what the
too.
distinction would be if you want to say it's brainwashing. So that's one of the standard ways of talking about it, right?
If someone starts to sort of take on ideals that are reference without of themselves more than they reference within. Maybe that's one thing, like a cult clicking kind of thing, where you brainwash and and you start working toward your own ill will because of someone else's suggestion, perhaps.
Could, but if we want brainwashing model, Heaven's Gate was a pretty bad brainwasher. They
Because
had hundreds of members, and most of them left.
they could come and go as they
In fact,
pleased.
They kicked people out. They said, if you can't stick with the program, you should leave. There was one ex-member who was there when suicide first came up, and he said, as soon as they mentioned suicide, people got up and left.
Yeah.
And several people just quit basically that week. If that's brainwashing, it seems pretty bad.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
So-
and the distinction is with Jonestown, they were not allowed to leave. So that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
that's a
hostage
big
situation. So that's even different.
Right.
That's different too.
There were no children involved. I'm not an expert on Jonestown or Branch Davidians or some of the other cases, but here's a case where all the members were people who had been there for, in many cases, decades. They were adults. They had moved around many times. Many of them had jobs outside of the community, and they were commuting back and forth from the community's shared home into the broader world. If they wanted to leave, they could have left.
Right.
And in fact, many people did leave. So to me, if you want to call it a cult, you're not saying it because of brainwashing. When people call Heaven's Gate a cult, I think it's often because they think their beliefs are weird.
Right.
And I would challenge your listeners, everyone's beliefs are weird to someone else. I don't know why we should assume Heaven's Gate is any weirder than anyone else. And frankly, I consider all religions weird, which is why I love to study them. And I just...
Yeah, I agree.
It's not my place to judge. You believe in space aliens, you believe in Jesus. That's I think that both of them are fair beliefs. And I'm not going to evaluate whose beliefs are more or less crazy than someone else's.
I know. Jesus is basically a zombie. I mean, that's what...
I've heard that before. Or we could keep going. We could add Zeus, add Lord
Right,
Shiva.
right,
I mean,
right.
Any living or gone religion, we could say the same thing.
So with Nettle's beliefs, she believed in ascended masters. So then did Applewhite transfer that over? So then Jesus was an ascended master, so they didn't have just one Messiah deity kind of being? Is that how their religion played out?
Yeah, well, it first started that way. By the end, this is a group which changed a lot over the time.
Okay, yeah.
Over its 20 years of existence. So by the end, their primary teaching was that while there may be many ascended masters and many next level beings, and there are who could serve that role, for our planet, there's only one sort of chief executive, and that is the being known as Jesus, who reports to the being which was known as God the Father.
Got it. Okay.
So
He's
while
our
there are
ascended
many
master.
ascended
Gotcha.
masters, you had to go through that one on our planet.
There was inklings of that. So I used to be in evangelical Christianity as well, and the last denomination that I was in was called Seventh-day Adventism, which you've probably studied. Yeah, and this was not an actual idea that was preached from the pulpit, but sort of like the chattering amongst probably the younger members would talk about that as well, like that belief. And this was before Heaven's Gate. This was back in the 90s. But yeah, probably Jesus is our guy, but there's a lot of other planets. And Jesus says there's a verse that says, he says, I have other sheep that are not of this pen. And we kind of thought, oh, that sounds like actually he's talking about other planets and other, the stuff that's going on. So that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I find a lot of my own beliefs in what we're talking about, or at least some of and I shouldn't say beliefs as much as thoughts and things that I've come across and been influenced by.
As soon as they discovered, as soon as people started taking seriously the Copernican revolution, and that our sun is just a sun, and our
Yes.
planet is just a planet, and there's lots of other stars up there, each of which may have planets, and people realized this, in the late Middle Ages, early modern period. As soon as people started thinking about that, immediately they made the theological shift towards, well, do they all have their own gods? Do they all have
Right.
their own Jesus figure? Benjamin Franklin wrote about that.
Mhm.
Benjamin Franklin wrote, in that time of the early republic, that he assumed that other planets had their own religions and had their own God, and he was going to worship the God of the Bible because he was here on Earth. But he actually wrote, he said, I don't know what on other planets people worship. Maybe they have a different God.
Right.
Fascinating.
So yeah, people have been thinking about this and talking about this a long time. Yeah.
Fascinating. I mean, even George Washington. I remember because we interview a lot of people with UFOs on our show. So even I think he supposedly was encountered a alien.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that Franklin wrote about it. I mean, Franklin really was thinking about it, and at one point he implies that the God of the Bible is a created being, and that there may be a God above for sort of all the different planets would have sort of their own God, which is also an idea which it gets picked up again in the 19th century with Mormonism, for example, the idea that there's
Yes,
different
that's right.
gods for different planets. If you live in a post Galileo universe, as we all do, with lots of stars and different planets, it's an obvious theological question. Even C.S. Lewis wrote about this, right? I mean, he's a committed evangelical Christian, and for Lewis, I mean, he actually writes in his space trilogy about the danger of humans exploring space is that we have sort of this fallen nature, and he doesn't assume any other species does. So even he's thinking about this and about the nature of sort of God and theology to different planets. Yeah, I don't think it's silly. I think it's
no,
a serious.
I don't think it's silly at all. And I know a lot of Mason, like Freemasonry. They were, because Benjamin Franklin. Most of these they believe in a being, or not God, the God Almighty, but like a God of the universe type of thing. It was not necessarily a religious thing. It was more of a spirituality thing.
Yeah, and you hear in metaphysics and people in sort of current non-religious, supposedly spirituality, just using the word source. You know what I mean? Just like the source of all creation,
Right.
The creative source, and that God is actually everything. We're all a part of God. We're just an expression of God, like my finger's an expression of my body. To take it away from that, a dude.
2,500 years ago, the Platonists and then later the Neoplatonists were saying the same thing. I mean, these ideas.
Well, that's when metaphysics actually was born, right?
Yeah. To quote one of my favorite series, all this has happened before, all this will happen again.
Right. And I'm curious on religion, because I mean, I know, just for an example, let's say my sister, drugs, alcohol, became a born again Christian. And then it's fascinating, and even like not saying she's a cult, but the fascinating to watch the transition of people once religion, the word religion, they start diving into it. What as a teacher of religion, spirituality in religion, what's the biggest difference? Is there a difference at all? Is it mostly just because? Could you explain that to me?
Yeah, well, this is a really hot debate among those of us who study it. One of the primary ways people try to distinguish spirituality from religion is that spirituality is non-institutional.
Mm-hmm.
It's an individual practice, and often it can draw from different sources.
Right.
The problem with that is there's usually institutions lurking behind there somewhere. Someone has to publish the books that you're reading. Someone has to organize the speakers that are coming through.
Right.
Someone has to run the podcast you're listening to.
Right.
Well, it's just institutional in a different way. I think a better understanding might be to say that spirituality is intentionally syncretistic. It amalgamates. It pulls from different sources in a way in which when people use the word religion, they don't tend to mean that. They usually tend to mean one of these sort of older groups which has been around a while. But honestly, as a scholar of it, I tend to just sort of go with what my informants say, whatever they're going to call it. But it's messy. It's really messy on the ground. What people say they believe or do, how they practice it. A person who says, I'm a Christian, but I believe in reincarnation. Well, okay, if that's what you believe, but That's many other Christians would say that's literally anathema, forbidden.
Right.
Whereas, I've had students who share sort of their deep religious spiritual commitments and say, I'm X and I believe in Y. And, I just say that's what it is. That's reality. I mean, people mix and combine and they draw from different sources, and others prefer to just stick with what they think is the literal text and what they think is the right way to go. And again, honestly, I take them all seriously and I respect them all on their own. I don't think you should respect any less a person who combines and draws from different sources than you should a person who says, I am just an X and I'm going to go with the teachings of X. I think they both merit the same respect. And as a scholar, I try to treat them similarly.
How many people that left the Heaven's Gate, did you get to talk with many of the survivors?
Yeah, I've only spoken with about 4 or so, like either face-to-face or telephone or Skype or things like that. And I've email corresponded with another probably 3 or 4, and I wrote letters back and forth to another couple of people. So I don't know, about maybe a dozen ex-members that I've communicated with.
Well, I'm curious on the transition, like we were talking, that once they got involved with Heaven Gates, the transition until, like you said, even up to this, when they talked about suicide, what was the suicide the only thing that really broke them away from the group, or was it just the transition of the leadership that they saw the direction that the reason they left?
The vast number of ex-members actually left in the mid to late 70s when the group went from being very sort of loose about sort of, they were going from sort of campground to campground and everyone was sort of trying to tune into the next level on their own. They went from that to having a much more formal set of guidelines about how they were supposed to try to tune into the next level. And all these rules were put into effect. The idea they wanted to separate themselves from their human bodies and the human level. So that meant no drugs, no alcohol, and no sex. So as soon as they instituted those rules, the vast majority of members actually left. They went from several hundred down at their peak down to several dozen. And then over the rest of the history, people left for really idiosyncratic reasons. Someone left because they got a job and they wanted to go pursue a job as opposed to being part of the group.
Right.
Some left because they didn't like the teachings. Others left because they didn't get along. It was pretty, as I said, idiosyncratic. There were different reasons. But that big core which left in the late 70s, it was because the group really shifted focus from being very open and really not enforcing any rules to saying, if you want to go to the next level, you have to act like the next level. And next level beings are not earthly. That means we have to stop acting like earthly, fleshy human beings. We need to be more like these perfected angelic beings.
All right, so
I'm out of here.
So behind the scenes, because I find this fascinating, like Jonestown, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but actually it was here in West Hollywood. He had a church here, and then they kept moving because the authorities kept kind of following. It was on CNN. It was on CNN. Yeah, and I can't remember the name of it. Now the guy's living in Hawaii with his own group. A lot of the group left, but he also says, no sex, no this. But he was having sex with all the guys that were in the group. So, but nobody else could have sex. So, was this going on with Heaven's Gate also, where Whitehead was also?
You mean Applewhite?
Applewhite, I'm sorry.
Essentially, was Applewhite, was he a narcissist?
So according to all the evidence we have, ex-members, testimonies, he was not engaged in any sort of nefarious activities. He was as celibate as the rest of them. And in fact, he eventually was castrated, as some other members were as well. So there's no indication that he was living any sort of differently than the rest of them in terms of the rules. There's also no indication that he was pilfering funds or anything like that. They kept pretty good ledger. It's possible something is hidden. If it is, then we will never know about it. But according to even the sort of angriest ex-members who left, and there were a couple angry ex-members, they accused him of sort of spiritual error. They didn't accuse him of engaging in some sort of immoral activity. So I think in this group, I don't think he was actually up to anything too nasty. Now, was he a narcissist? Well, I mean, he led a religion. I think you I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'm not a psychologist.
but that is a clinical term. I mean, there's leaders who aren't narcissists, but you know what I mean. Like, so that's but a person who is like the Branch Davidians. What was his name?
David
Koresh. You know, by all accounts, it seems that he was just like this other person you're mentioning, because it's like, do as I say, not as I do, and all that kind of stuff. That seemed to be more of a narcissistic personality. But there are leadership. If he's walking the walk, and of course we don't know because you didn't actually get to interview him personally, nor was he actually diagnosed by a clinical psychologist. But it just seems like from our assumption from this outside, if he walked the walk, then maybe he was just a leader and of a religion in a decent sense.
I think he really did believe it. I think that he may have enjoyed being, a leader in religion. I don't know.
Right.
I did have an ex-member tell me that they thought that he was tired all the time, that he was really tired of dealing with leading a group and having 40 odd people always asking him things. I don't know. It's a great question. I've watched all of the videos he's produced, and I find him personally, I don't find him charismatic at all. So I don't understand the draw that members had, but many ex-members have told me they felt as if he was sort of he drew them in, and that he was a sort of a magnetic personality. Other members have told me it was actually Nettles T, who died in the mid-1980s, the co-founder, who was actually more charismatic and more sort of a magnetic individual. But I never had a chance to meet her, obviously.
Now, were there any survivors that actually kept Heaven Gates going?
Well, there are ex-members who still believe it, and there were some ex-members who sort of rejoined and committed suicide or exited, to use their term, after the main suicide.
Did not know that.
So there were 3 or 4 people who were members and then left, and then after the suicides decided that actually they wanted to rejoin the main group, the class as they called it. That was the name within the group. They called it the class. So they wanted to rejoin the class. And there were also some other people who sort of claimed that they had. There was I think 1 or 2 others who said that they wanted to join. They were never members to begin with, but they said, "Yeah, I'm into it," and they either committed suicide or tried to commit suicide. But there's also people who are still around who were members and who still believe it. And certainly some of them I've spoken with, and others are living sort of silent lives off the radar. And who knows how many of them there are. I don't.
Are they meeting? Is there any kind
of
No,
there's no
fellowship?
group. There's no group. That's what I mean. There's no group. There's lone individuals now, but there's no group.
And the whole the exiting had to do with the timing of that spaceship.
Yeah, wasn't there something like an alignment or something? I don't know.
Yeah, and so these who believe now, who are following this religion, do some of them at least believe there's going to be another one of these opportunities, or how does it carry on past that?
Yeah, one of the core ideas is that it's cyclical. So Applewhite said that on a 2,000-year cycle, there are opportunities to ascend to the next level.
I see.
So those who remain have to either wait 2,000 years, or there's some sort of ideas that some ex-members have that perhaps there'll be another opening a little sooner than that.
Okay.
But at the latest, you have to wait another 2,000 years or so, because they believe in reincarnation.
Right.
So that's a while, but that's not. It's not that long.
They're building themselves now, even though it's going to be in this lifetime, and if they believe in reincarnation, then they must believe that. I mean, I don't know if they must, but I think theosophical influence would say that all time periods exist now anyway. So if they exit now, then they could reincarnate in essentially back into 2007. You see what I mean? Like that's.
Yeah, I'm not sure they actually went to that level. I don't honestly know where they stood on that particular question, but the general answer is yes. I mean, they believed you could come back.
Sure.
Now, the trick was, or the goal was not if you ascended to the next level. If you ascended to the next level, you never came back. That was the goal. The rest of us are in the samsara-like existence, to use the term.
And is the only way they could ascend is through the gate?
Yes, yeah, that was really important. So one of the metaphors they used was that there were many ways up the mountain, but only one way off.
Got it.
All religion or spiritual paths could lead you up the top, but there was only one way off, and that was through the UFOs and through the teachings of ultimately Nettles and Applewhite, T and Do. But not that they didn't see value in other paths as well.
And again, was it? What's her name? Nettles. Was she the one that actually did she have like a vision? One more time for the people that I missed it. Maybe I missed it. Did she have a vision, a visitation from an alien that told her about this coming?
She channeled this information, I think.
So, but okay, because I mean, we get a lot of.
No, the channeling was entirely telepathic.
Okay.
So at least that's all I've seen. They had years in which the group was sort of insulated within themselves, and I don't know what they were talking about then. But at least when they spoke to the public and discussed how they received the knowledge they had, they always said it was telepathic. They never claimed to be in a direct face-to-face encounter or any sort of material vision.
And did this was this ongoing as like visions kept coming throughout the years, and then that's when it was revealed that this, because they didn't know this at the beginning, that a certain time and date but
it was unfolding over time. Nettles was the primary, or T or Peep as her name was within the group. She was the primary conduit or channel. And then after she passes away, so she passes away in the mid 80s, Applewhite claims that he is able to continue to communicate with her. But by his own admission, he is not as strong of a channel as she was. So he can only communicate with her. He doesn't communicate with sort of all of the next level. So whereas she had these abilities early on to communicate in a much broader way.
Wow. Fascinating. And I'm fascinated. What do you teach? Do you teach this in the class where you're at?
Yeah, I have. I teach a class on new religions, and I've also teach classes on American religion. And yeah, I have.
What is the reaction from your students?
It's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious of the reaction of some of your students of what they ask and what their thoughts on Heaven's Gate.
Well, I mean, my students usually the first question they have is, why would anyone take this seriously? And I think my answer to them is the same answer I've given to you, which is I don't think it's any sillier than anyone else's beliefs. It may seem far-fetched from the outside, but once you're inside of it from sort of a circular perspective, it makes sense. And if you're looking for something, by definition, if you're looking for something, it means what you would have to begin with, you don't accept. So if you're raised Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or whatnot, or nothing, and you're looking for something else, you don't find the religion which you were given by society, by your parents, to be acceptable and to be valuable. So you're looking elsewhere, and something which might look very silly to others makes sense to you. So that's why I think people took it seriously. Students often ask me, because I teach 18 to 21-year-olds, they say, how come they couldn't have sex? How come they couldn't drink? How come they couldn't smoke drugs?
That's funny.
The answer is that for members of Heaven's Gate, they wanted to live like next level beings. And they also wanted to live in a monastic lifestyle. And also the people who joined, by and large, had done all those things, often in excess for decades. And it wasn't bringing them happiness. They said, I spent a decade joining different communes and, trying free love and smoking everything I could find and dropping acid and trying to get in touch with God. None of it worked. Mm-hmm. And so let me try this other method, which is to abstain from all that. And for some people, they stuck with it. And those are the members who are in Heaven's Gate. Others said it's not going to work, or I don't want to do it. And they obviously became the ex-members.
I do find that fascinating that you say that, with the Mansons and the Jonestown and Heaven Gates, how it really started right after, the free love and the hippies and all that stuff.
There's a story I recount in the book. It's from a article which I read in probably 77 or so in a newspaper. A reporter was interviewing the husband of a woman who had sort of abandoned him to go join this group. And they asked him, were you surprised that your wife left you to go join this UFO cult, as it was called then? He said, I wasn't too surprised. She had already been baptized 3 times in the last year.
Oh. Right.
Well, I mean,
that makes me go like, because the poor lady was seeking,
She was.
Yeah.
And that's, there was another
Yeah.
member, this is a different person, who said that she had tried a bunch of stuff. She had tried TM, Transcendental Meditation. She had tried joining a kibbutz in Israel. She had tried all the drugs she could find. And finally she found this, and this was the answer to her quest.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's a surprise that this group
Yeah.
began in the late 70s. I'm not sure it could have begun any other time, given sort of what they taught and their trajectory.
Well, I want to ask you a sort of editorial question, which as a scholar you may or may not answer. But I'm just curious, how useful do you think religions are, globally speaking? I mean, are they actually helpful to people or to us as a human race?
Well, I think it depends on the person.
Sure.
Like most sane people, I'm not a fan of religious terrorism or things like that. I think extremism is dreadful. On the other hand, there's lots of forms of extremism, political extremism, and it's not just religion. And I'm not convinced that religious extremists would be any less extreme if they didn't find some other way of doing it. I think that
exactly.
If people who are hateful and violent and are looking for simplistic answers can probably find that in all sorts of things beyond religion. And if religion disappeared, I think we would still have racism. We would still have violence. We would still have all the problems of the world. They would just be in a different form.
Right.
However, religion does enable some, incredible forms of hatred and violence and destruction because it links it to ultimate concerns. It's one thing to say, I hate people because of the color of their skin or because of where they live. It's another to say, God tells me that. Religion also has led to the building of some of those most amazing monuments that the world has ever seen, some of the finest art, the most beautiful music, some of the most epic poetry. I honestly think it's a fair trade-off, but I could understand John Lennon. Imagine without religion, right?
Yeah. Dennis Prager, once I was listening to him on his show, on a radio show, and he said that he just thinks that most people, in order to be better people, need religion or some kind of externally imposed or suggested set of beliefs in order for they need some sort of almost punitive backstop to not cheat on their wife or something like that. They need some extra help like that. They need an authority.
How sad if that's true.
I agree. It's very sad. I hope that's not true.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I can tell you that one of my sort of literary heroes is Carl Sagan. I've read a lot. And I know people in the paranormal community often don't think highly of him because he was...
Oh, I do.
But I think that one of his most valuable books where he talks about it is in the Variety of Scientific Experience, which he wrote, co-edited with his wife towards the end. And he talks about this. He talks about how you can find morality outside of religion and you can find wonder outside of religion. And he did. So for some people, I don't think they need religion, and Sagan's a good example. Yeah. But perhaps there are others who really do feel like they need to find it in religion. And I guess if you're the sort of person who you would, commit adultery or kill someone if you didn't have the image of God looking over you, I'm glad you have God.
Prager thinks that and to give context, he says it's possible, just that the majority of people, that's what his opinion was. That it was the majority of people.
If it's true, it may be, and it's depressing. But then again, sometimes the world is depressing. Not my field, so I can't comment on that.
Oh, sure.
And one thing that you said at the beginning is that, no judgment, because a cult really is not a cult. That's religion. Yeah. And like you said,
it's a religion to them.
Yeah, and it's a religion to them. So how do we understand as a society then? Because we're such a division. Not only religions, but race and everything. But how does one, when we hear about cults, or how do we try to understand them a little bit more as somebody that's teaches religion?
Well, I think that cults speak to a human longing for belonging. What pretty much every cult, if you want to use that term, or new religion, or old religion for that matter, offers is a sense of community. And I think that there's a nearly universal sense of community. Most people want to be part of a community. Right. What cults often offer is sort of a very welcoming community, a community which not only welcomes you, but also says this is the right way to live and offers certainty. And that probably speaks to another sort of psychological foundation that many people have, which is the desire to feel as if they have the right answers. I think that maybe we all have this in us, but that people who choose to join new religions often are looking for even more community and more certainty than the rest of us. But I think we can find some of the same in pretty much every religion. I mean, most religions teach, or all religions I'm aware of actually teach, that they have access to the truth and that one can create communities around that truth. So in some ways, all cults are basically religions, and all religions are cults too, just in different forms.
And I know there's, I'm sure, family members out there that have their children that have joined the religion or a cult that they don't know how to approach or how to even understand their child or even a family member. If someone in your family, how would you do it? Because you said there's no judgment. So how would you, if you saw somebody in a situation like this and they were talking about a mass suicide, you can't go, no judgment. I mean, you want to react. So how would you react to that?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, if we're talking about a group which is, where they're all locked up or something, or they're moving far away from everyone else, or collecting guns and preparing for a shootout, that's a different story, right? So if they're engaged in clearly violent behavior or a buildup to violent behavior, that's very different from what I'm talking about.
Right.
And that's a time to call in law enforcement. That's a time to call in social workers. That's a time to bring in the professionals. If we're talking about a group which seems to have strange beliefs, then and we're talking about sort of family members, I would say that the trick is to not reject immediately out of hand what your family member is doing, because that will only reinforce that you're outside and they're inside. I would suggest quite openly to say, tell me what you believe. Tell me about why you believe this. Tell me why this makes sense to you. Tell me what you're getting out of this. And it's entirely possible that this individual is getting something out of it which is beautiful to them, which is meaningful to them, even if it's not the choice you would make. People choose to do all sorts of things which to others doesn't make sense. People choose to become monks and nuns in all sorts of churches, religion, and to live celibate lives, and to take vows of poverty, or to take vows of obedience and things like that. And it might look very strange, but to a member of of a religious order, it makes total sense. People choose to become a Marine, and if you're a nonviolent Quaker, that wouldn't make any sense. Or vice versa, right? A Marine would look at a nonviolent Quaker and say, "How could you take a vows of nonviolence and things like that?" So, I think that for me, sort of a charitable approach to wanting to sort of take seriously people's claims and beliefs until proven otherwise is the heart of it. If it turns out that a person has made their decisions because they're suffering from mental illness, that's a separate issue.
Right.
If it turns out that they're locked up or being beaten or something, that's a separate issue. But I wouldn't assume from the onset the worst. I would assume, and I would hope that for most people, and we know sociologically speaking, most people join groups and leave them. The vast majority of people leave, and then 10 years later, they're not members anymore.
Right.
Sometimes even 5 years later. That for many people, it's just part of their trajectory through life. That's my
and just like today, what we're doing is just having a conversation. Even in my 20s, I remember I'd go to a Buddhist temple. I would, even though I knew I was not going to be a Buddhist, and I would listen to Jehovah's Witness. I knew I wasn't going to be. I was fascinated by how people choose a religion and how they celebrate a religion, how they live with a religion, and I've always found it fascinating. And Tricia, you had a great story of growing up where you did, and the religion, and now becoming more of a spirituality than a religion.
Yes, definitely. And
I just find it fascinating.
Well, and the way I feel that I keep myself more in I think if we think of religion as a set of beliefs, I guess, that's one way to look at it. And so then that's very individual. And then, of course, everybody has religion, an individual religion. But then the other way to look at it is a group think of a structure of beliefs. And so that's what I do. It just seems to be cleaner for me to have very little group think. I do, not that I don't fellowship or talk with other people who have similar beliefs to me, or listen to them, but I keep it in the realm of, hey, my beliefs to me are just, a belief is just a thought that you continue to think, and then you create an emotion comes from that, and that actually forms a neural pathway in your brain, and that's kind of what beliefs look like in your brain, is a structure.
This is too, because do stuff too, right? So every religion has practices as well as beliefs.
Yes.
Which also reinforce, what's going on in the brain.
Yes.
the term is neuroplasticity, right? The brain rewires
Exactly.
itself. So not just what do you believe, but also what you do.
Yes, yeah.
Every religion has this.
Yeah, and so I have a morning meditation. I'm
Yeah.
very religious about it because that's what keeps me, feeling more like me. And,
And part of what fascinated me about Heaven's Gate is that everyone focuses on their beliefs and they say almost nothing about the practices. So I was working on the book. There we go. So one of the, sort of the big central chunks of the book is what were their practice. It's easy to say, well, they believe in all this stuff and it looks sort of strange, but it turns out they prayed. It turned out that they meditated.
Right.
It turned out that they followed different sort of forms of diets to sort of try to purge themselves. It turned out that they lived in community in homes, and that they gave different names to different parts of their homes, trying to sort of rhetorically transform them into a spaceship. They referred to the laundry room as the fiber lab, and the kitchen as the Nutra lab.
Oh.
They did all sorts of stuff as people who had beliefs and had community, but lived it out in practice. And that's the part which often gets missed. And if we just think about them as having wacky beliefs, it's easier to dismiss them as just a bunch of duped idiots. But which you're welcome to if that's your opinion. But at least know first that that's what they were up to. But at the end of the day, you read the book or you hear us talk about it, and you think they were a bunch of idiots, and the world is better off without them. Fine, that's your business. I mean, it's not my place to speak for them. It's not my place to try to convince you they're right. I don't actually believe they were right, but I do think we should take them seriously.
Well, I just love your take on it. I mean, because
I actually don't think their beliefs are wacky. I mean, they see
Yeah.
all of the stuff that I read about, and I go, okay. I mean, they're not necessarily my beliefs, but they're also not necessarily not my beliefs. You know what I mean?
All the ex-members I've spoken with, they're lovely people. And I
Yeah.
really think that had I spoken with more of the individuals before they left, they would have been lovely people too. I've viewed the videos. Most of the people who committed the suicides or made the left exit videos, I've watched those probably 50 times now.
Oh.
I don't know them, obviously. I never met them. But I think these were people who were deeply committed. And I think these were people who were really special souls in some way. And I don't think that they were idiots. I don't think that they were duped. I don't think that the world is better off without them. But I respect their choices. If I were to have met them, before the suicides, I would have tried to convince them not to leave, because I don't personally support what they did.
Right.
However, I respect their choice, and I respect their choice to do it.
Right.
Wow.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. This was a great interview, and I really loved your take on everything. The book is, I think you can get it on Amazon. You can get it pretty much probably any bookstore.
Kindle version too, I think now. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it's called Heaven's Gate: America's UFO Religion. And I think your website is it the nrms.net?
Yeah. So that stands for New Religious Movements. So nrms.net.
Perfect.
Newreligiousmovements.net. Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope we can have you back again one of these days, and please go out and support this book. And thank you so much again for being on Truth Be Told.
It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting with you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. And we want to thank Tricia for being here. Thank you so much, Tricia, for doing this. And I know you've been sick the last couple of days. So
Don't tell.
Well, but you're a trooper. That's just showing that you're a dedicated trooper.
It's such an honor to be here, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you. And we want to thank you guys. We want to thank you guys because we just, as of today, hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, over 1 million views. We want to thank you guys for supporting us, and listen to us on our YouTube channel. Leave a comment. We would love to hear from you guys. Tell us some of the guests that you would like to see on Truth Be Told. You can also hear our podcast on iHeartRadio and on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, all the other places. So thank you so much. Until then, we'll see you next week on Truth Be Told.